Captain Lee Jun's body lay perfectly still in the crystalline coffin that the colony had provided as a gesture of respect. His dark hair was neatly combed. But nothing could hide the silver scars that ran across his left temple where alien plasma had nearly claimed his life 3 days ago. His military uniform, pressed and cleaned, still bore the burn marks from the final battle above Earth's atmosphere. The Medal of Honor gleamed on his chest, but it felt hollow compared to the price he had paid. The funeral hall buzzed with whispered conversations in dozens of languages. Towering Kalani warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with their former enemies, their blue skin shimmering under the soft lights. Their 6 arms were folded in the traditional pose of mourning, something no human had ever witnessed before. These same beings had arrived at Earth's doorstep 6 months ago with weapons that could crack planets, expecting an easy conquest. They had not expected Lee Jun. Dr. Park Hannah stood at the front of the massive hall, her small frame dwarfed by the alien dignitaries surrounding her. Her grey hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her hands shook slightly as she clutched a worn photograph of her son as a child. She had spent 30 years studying alien biology, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The Kalani Emperor himself had offered to preserve Jun's body using their advanced technology, promising he would remain unchanged for 1,000 years. Other species had suggested energy transformation ceremonies that would scatter his essence among the stars, but Hannah had refused them all. My son was human, she had told the gathered ambassadors. He will be buried as a human. Ambassador Yuntai shifted uncomfortably in his formal robes. He had argued with Hannah for hours, explaining that rejecting alien customs could damage the fragile peace treaties. The colony had never shown such respect to another species before. Their offer was unprecedented. Yet here they were, in a simple human ceremony that probably seemed primitive to beings who could travel between galaxies. General Kimbre watched the crowd with sharp eyes, even in mourning. He remained alert. The hulking Dorvic representatives near the back wall kept their massive claws sheathed, but their yellow eyes tracked every movement. The floating whisper entities communicated in musical tones that only their translators could understand. And scattered throughout the hall were the mechanical servants of the Archive Collective, their sensors recording everything for their digital masters 3 days ago. This same mixture of species had been locked in the most brutal space battle in recorded history. The Kalani Empire had brought 12 full battle fleets to crush what they saw as an upstart species that had dared to refuse their demands for surrender. Earth's combined forces had barely managed to field 3 fleets, cobbled together from every nation and corporation that could build a spacecraft. The battle had raged for 18 hours across the solar system. Massive Kalani dreadnoughts, each the size of a city, had exchanged fire with Earth's smaller, but more agile fighters. The space between Mars and Jupiter had become a graveyard of twisted metal and burning plasma. For every human ship destroyed, they had managed to take down to colony vessels. But the mathematics were simple. Earth was losing. That was when Captain Lee Jun had made his choice. Leading the final squadron of Earth's remaining fighters, he had punched through the Kalani defensive screen and rammed his ship directly into their command vessel. But something had gone wrong with his ship's self-destruct sequence. Instead of a clean explosion, his fighter had somehow merged with the alien ship's power core, creating a feedback loop that shut down every colony vessel in the system. The silence that followed had been deafening. 12 colony fleets, each capable of destroying worlds, floating dead in space. And somewhere in the wreckage, Lee Jun had vanished. It had taken the rescue teams 2 days to find him, unconscious but alive, floating in a pocket of atmosphere near the destroyed command ship. The Kalani technology around him had been fused into strange new configurations, as if it had been trying to merge with his body. The alien medics had declared it impossible for any organic being to survive such exposure to their quantum cores. But survive he had, at least long enough to see his mother one more time. He had spoken to her for barely 10 minutes before the strange energy readings round his body had spiked and then suddenly stopped. The monitors had gone flat. Captain Lejeune, the man who had single-handedly ended the war, was gone. Now, as Hannah approached the coffin, the entire hall fell silent. Even the usually chattering Zigdela gates stopped their constant clicking. The moment felt heavy with importance, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Hannah's weathered hands reached for the coffin's lid, and Ambassador Yuntai found himself leaning forward despite his diplomatic training. None of them were prepared for what happened next. The moment Hannah's fingers touched the coffin's edge, everything changed. A gentle blue light began to pulse from within, like a heartbeat made of pure energy. At first, it was so faint that people thought it might be a reflection from the ceremonial lighting. But as Hannah lifted the transparent lid, the glow intensified, casting dancing shadows across the massive funeral hall. The light wasn't coming from any external source. It was radiating directly from June's skin, seeping through the fabric of his uniform like liquid starlight. The colony delegates immediately stepped back, their advanced sensors going wild with readings they had never seen before. Their translator units sparked and flickered, struggling to process the energy signatures emanating from the human's body. Dr. Obin had been standing near the back of the hall, quietly observing the ceremony. As Earth's chief medical officer, he had personally examined June's body after the rescue teams had brought him back. The captain had been clinically dead for over 6 hours, with no brain activity and no vital signs, yet something about the energy readings from the colony wreckage had bothered him. The quantum signatures didn't match anything in their databases. Now, as the blue light grew brighter, Obin pushed through the crowd of startled dignitaries. His medical scanner was already in his hand, beeping frantically as he approached the coffin. The readings were impossible, not just improbable or unlikely, but completely beyond the laws of physics as humanity understood them. Impossible, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing murmur of the crowd. The silver scars on June's temple began to glow more intensely than the rest of his body. The damaged tissue was rebuilding itself, cell by cell, as if an invisible hand was rewiring his entire nervous system. The burn marks on his uniform started to fade, and the fabric itself seemed to be repairing the damage from the plasma fire. Hannah gasped and stumbled backward. But she couldn't tear her eyes away from her son, the pale, lifeless face she had been. Morning was gaining color. The blue light pulsed faster now, matching the rhythm of a beating heart, and then, impossibly, she saw his chest rise slightly. The Kalani Emperor's personal guard immediately activated their combat protocols. These beings had conquered 17 star systems, and they knew dangerous energy when they saw it. Their biosuits began to glow with defensive shields, but their weapons remained holstered. Even they seemed uncertain about what they were witnessing. The floating whisper entities began to sing in harmonies that sent chills down every human spine. Their musical language was expressing something between awe and terror. The mechanical sounds of the Archive Collective were recording everything, their optical sensors adjusting rapidly to capture the unprecedented energy readings. Dr. Ubin's scanner was now screaming warnings in 3 different languages. The device was designed to monitor human physiology, but it was detecting cellular activity, and like anything in its programming, neural pathways were forming new connections at impossible speeds. The brain patterns were not just active but evolving, creating structures that shouldn't exist in any known biological system. His heart, Obin announced to the crowd, his voice shaking with disbelief. It's beating. The blue light suddenly intensified, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the brightness faded, they could see that June's chest was indeed rising and falling with steady, rhythmic breathing. The monitors that Obin had hastily connected to the coffin were displaying vital signs that defied explanation, but this wasn't ordinary resurrection. As the light pulsed through June's body, strange patterns began to appear on his skin, geometric designs that resembled colony neural mapping technology, but somehow more complex and beautiful. The alien technology he had been exposed to during the collision wasn't just keeping him alive, it was transforming him into something entirely new. The Dorvik representatives at the back of the hall began to growl warning sounds. Their species had an instinctive fear of genetic modification, having fought wars against artificial beings in their past. But even they seemed mesmerized by the peaceful nature of the transformation occurring before them. General Kimray had his hand on his sidearm, but he wasn't sure if he was preparing to protect June or protect everyone else from him. The energy readings were off the charts. Yet there was no sense of threat or danger. If anything, the light felt warm and welcoming, like sunshine after a long winter. Ambassador Yuntai was frantically trying to contact the orbital defense platforms, but his communication device was malfunctioning in the presence of the energy field. Every piece of technology in the hall was experiencing some form of interference, yet none of it seemed malicious. Hannah reached out tentatively toward her son's face, and the blue light seemed to respond to her presence, growing brighter where her hand approached. She could feel warmth radiating from him, and for the first time in 3 days, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't lost him after all. The patterns on June's skin were becoming more defined now, creating a network of light that pulsed in perfect synchronization with his heartbeat. Whatever was happening to him was almost complete. June's eyelids fluttered open like someone waking from the deepest sleep of their life. But these weren't the same dark brown eyes that Hannah remembered from her son's childhood. They now held tiny points of blue light, like stars reflected in deep water, swirling and pulsing with each heartbeat. The transformation was complete, yet somehow he still looked exactly like her boy. He blinked slowly, as if trying to focus on a world that had suddenly become much larger and more complex. His head turned slightly, and Hannah could see the confusion in his expression as new sensations flooded his mind. Then, with movements that seemed both careful and powerful, he began to sit up in the coffin. The crowd instinctively stepped back, creating a wide circle round the resurrection they were witnessing. Even the massive Dorvik warriors who feared nothing in the known galaxy found themselves moving away from the glowing human who had just returned from the dead. But June's first concern wasn't the crowd of alien dignitaries or the impossible situation he found himself in. His glowing eyes immediately found his mother's face in the sea of startled onlookers. A gentle smile crossed his lips. The same smile Hannah had seen 1,000 times when he was a child coming home from school. "Mother," he said, and his voice carried something extraordinary. The single word rippled through the air like music. Every species in the hall heard it in their own language. But more than that, they felt the emotion behind it. The colloid delegates, whose language consisted of complex harmonic frequencies, heard perfect tonal patterns they had never heard from a human throat. The crystalline Vec representatives, who communicated through light vibrations, saw colors in his speech that corresponded to their deepest concepts of love and family. The Gassismo ambassadors, floating in their containment suits, detected chemical signatures in his voice that spoke directly to their ancient understanding of bonds between parents and children. Even the mechanical archive servants recorded harmonics that their quantum processors labeled as impossible but beautiful. Dr. Obin nearly dropped his scanner. The device was detecting neural activity that spanned frequencies no human brain should be able to produce. June's mind was somehow broadcasting on communication channels used by every species in the hall, simultaneously. But the most shocking discovery came from the colony prisoner transport that had been orbiting Earth, the captured enemy soldiers, who had been held in quantum-sealed cells since the battle, were all reporting the same phenomenon. They could hear June's voice in their minds, clear as if he were standing next to them. The prison ship's commanders were frantically trying to understand how a human could penetrate their most secure mental barriers, yet despite this impossible expansion of his abilities, June remained fundamentally human as he swung his legs over the edge of the coffin and stood up. He moved with the same careful grace he had always possessed. The blue patterns on his skin pulsed gently, creating a light show that was beautiful rather than frightening. "I can hear you," he said softly, looking round the hall. "All of you." The whisper entities immediately stopped their musical communication, realizing that their private conversations were no longer private. The VEC delegates dimmed their natural light displays, suddenly self-conscious about their normally hidden thoughts. Even the archive servants paused their constant data exchange, uncertain how to process this development. General Kimray stepped forward cautiously, his military training warring with his amazement. "Captain Lee, can you understand what you're hearing?" June turned toward the general, and for a moment, his enhanced perception seemed to overwhelm him. He could sense Kimray's memories of the battle, his fears about Earth's future, his genuine concern for June's well-being, and underneath it all, his pride in the young captain who had saved their world. "I understand everything," June replied, and his voice carried harmonics that made the general's translator device shut down completely. "Every thought, every emotion, every fear and hope in this room." The Kalani Emperor's personal guard began to reach for their weapons, but their leader raised one of his 6 arms to stop them. The massive blue-skinned being stepped forward, his own thoughts now an open book to the transformed human. "What are you?" the Emperor asked in his deep, resonant voice. June looked directly at the being whose empire had nearly destroyed Earth, and instead of anger or hatred, he felt something unexpected. He could sense the Emperor's confusion, his growing respect for humanity, and his genuine remorse for the war that had cost so many lives on both sides. "I am still June," he answered simply. "Son of Hannah, defender of Earth, but I'm also something more now." He turned back to his mother, who had been watching this exchange with tears streaming down her face. The blue light round him softened as he focused on her, and for a moment, the cosmic awareness faded into the background. "I remember everything, Mother. The battle, the collision, the moment when their technology merged with mine. I should have died, but something kept me here. Something wanted me to become a bridge." The hall remained silent, but June could hear the mental conversations happening all round him. The aliens were debating whether he was a threat or an opportunity. The humans were wondering if he was still one of them, and through it all, he could feel his mother's unconditional love, unchanged by whatever he had become. The news traveled faster than light itself through the galaxy's quantum communication networks. Within 3 hours of June's awakening, every major civilization knew that something unprecedented had happened on Earth. The human who had ended the colony war was alive, transformed, and apparently capable of telepathic communication with any species in the known universe. Admiral Song Ho received the emergency transmission while his fleet was patrolling the outer rim of the solar system. The grizzled veteran had served in space for 30 years, but nothing had prepared him for the report crackling through his comm system. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from Earth. The funeral ceremony has been interrupted." Song Ho's weathered face tightened as he studied the incoming data streams. The energy readings were off the charts, but more concerning were the fleet movements being detected throughout the galaxy. Every major power was mobilizing their ships, and they were all heading toward Earth. Set course for home. He ordered his bridge crew. Maximum speed and send word to every Earth vessel in the sector. We need to get back now. But Song Ho's fleet wasn't the only one moving. The Colony Empire, despite their recent defeat, had dispatched their reserve fleets from the outer territories. The Crystalline Vec Consortium was moving their geometric battleships through subspace rifts. The gaseous Moor Collective had emerged from their nebulous strongholds for the first time in centuries. Even the mysterious Archive Collective was sending their mechanical warships, their artificial intelligences calculating probabilities and outcomes at quantum speeds on Earth. The funeral hall had been evacuated and converted into an emergency command center. Military personnel worked frantically to set up communications and defensive protocols. The transformed June stood in the center of it all, his blue-patterned skin pulsing with energy as he monitored the approaching fleets. Through his expanded consciousness, 12 different armadas, he reported to General Kimray, his voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that had become his new normal. Some are coming to study me, others to capture me, and a few. He paused, his glowing eyes darkening slightly. If you are coming to destroy me before I become too powerful. The general's tactical display showed the same information. But seeing it through conventional sensors was different from having it beamed directly into his mind from someone who could sense the intent. Irons of every approaching ship. How long? Do we have? The fastest ships will arrive in 6 hours, June replied. The Vec Consortium's crystal ships controlled space round themselves. They'll be here first.